All right, cool. We're recording. And I was out sick yesterday, so it's not available.
No problem. I think we have a few things on the agenda, and we'll just give people another minute or two, and then we'll get started.
Sounds good. So I did have a couple things to run by everybody, but
Yeah, so just a couple of things that I think that I have on the agenda just to kind of go over with everybody is updates on the release for Neon, timelines and the highlights, highlights and deeper insight onto PyTest, anything from the work groups, and some upcoming events. And then I believe that David Murphy is going to highlight native minions. Do you have other things besides that, Cassandra?
a work group update, some updates on user groups as well, and then some talk about like office hours logistics, so mostly just housekeeping type things.
Cool. Yeah, we can probably get started then. We're about 5 minutes after almost. Do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
My stuff will just take a few minutes, so let's get the kind of logistical stuff out of the way. First of all, I know that there was some confusion and that people had logged into the office hour on Tuesday, not realizing that it had been rescheduled to Thursday. That was partly on me. I remembered to update Slack and the calendar, and I did not update the event management tool that we use that's called Bevy. So moving forward, I'll be making Bevy part of my workflow. On a related note, we are talking about moving the office hours permanently to Thursday morning. So I'm going to ask in Slack and find out if that works for everybody. I know it won't work for everybody, but find out if that's okay. And then if anybody has objections or challenges or conflicts they see about moving the office hours to Thursday in this call, let me know.
Yeah, I think our Twitter, whoever handles our Twitter, which I'm not actually sure who it is at the moment, internally posted that it was actually Wednesday. So I think we had all the way around some problems there. So we'll
Yeah.
work on that.
Yeah, that's a disconnect between marketing, me, community, and engineering. So I am going to get everything all on the same page.
Sounds good. Let me know if I can help there. I'm happy to.
All right, cool. But yeah, I think that's the likely case. And then we just won't have the open hour on the week that we have the office hours. So there's that. User groups and meetups. If anybody is in a city that has a meetup or wants a meetup, please let me know. I am this week kind of doing an audit of all of the meetups that we have existing, trying to get a response from their leaders, figure out if they're interested in revamping those meetups, and then deciding if it makes sense to have all 40 some meetups that we have right now, and if it makes sense to make new ones. So that's where we are with meetups. And then exciting news, I think this is something that I'm excited about, at least, and that is that we have the documentation work group up and running. We have our first meeting scheduled for February 20th, and putting together that work group has been a lot of fun because I've been working with a community representative, a SaltStack representative, and myself, and we've all worked together to decide when to do the documentation work group, what sorts of topics we'd want to cover, create the Slack channel for it, and start publicizing it. So it was cool to be able to collaborate with the community to make something happen that I know had been requested and on people's radar for a while. So, and if anybody that's kind of how work groups are formed, is somebody comes out and says, hey, we should do this thing. And there's a lot of things that, hey, we should do. So the minute somebody follows up and says, I'm willing to help run with this in some way, that makes it easier for it to go from we should do this thing to this thing exists. And that applies to work groups, that applies to topics that we might change, that applies to things like SEPs, any of that stuff. Just it takes somebody to help, propose solutions and kind of collaboration with me in order to make those things happen. So that's it. So thank you for that. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, we have a meetup that is planned for February 19th in LA, don't we?
Yes, we have one. Yep. And we had one in Houston as well last month. So I think Houston will be on a regular cadence because we have somebody there. And I think New York City is talking about it. So yeah.
Very good. Yeah, this one's, I think, coming up. And if people are in that area, it's on the meetup page for the main SALT meetup page, and then it's on the LA one. And it's Tom is going to be speaking, as well as Gareth, who is right now traveling, but is usually on this call. And so I think that'll be really great. So it's good to hear about those and maybe even announce them here so people are aware.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, let's jump right in. So next, I think we want to talk about Neon. Diwaz, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. What specifically do you want me to go over?
We were going to just go over some of the highlights that are going into Neon and the timeline, and ask if anybody has questions.
Sure, I can cover the timeline. Basically, we are looking at releasing on the 10th. We actually have things basically ready to go and are just doing some internal testing before the final release date.
Yeah, so we're getting close, and very exciting. We have, last time we went over in the open hour, we went over the deprecations and the release notes pretty specifically. So just to highlight, we do have a changelog in place now, and that's captured some really good changes for us that we can dive into deeper. Maybe Wayne, if you want to do that. And then of course we went into the deprecations themselves. And so I don't think we need to review that this week, but Wayne, do you want to just go over some of the highlights?
Yeah, I can, I guess, just talk kind of up from a high level on the change log. So that was a SALT enhancement proposal that was put in a while back, and we got the change log put in place and started adding stuff to it for Neon. And just with our whole change in branching and release, there were quite a lot of additions to that. So that took a lot of effort to get it all squared away. But going forward, and even for Neon, the changelog should be a human readable place that you can go to see what's coming out in this next release, which will be great because you won't have to like wade through a lot of commit information that we may have had in the past. So the changelog is very tightly focused on what is interesting to people. So we'll have things like features that we've added or changes that we've made, or when something is either deprecated or actually removed, those will be called out individually. So you can see, okay, what's going to be removed in the future and what was removed in this release. That way you can make sure that you're not using any of those features or changes, which will be very nice for people. So you're not surprised by by changes and all of a sudden Salt broke for you. So the changelog is going to be, I think, a very welcome change, but we just want to make sure that we're getting people to go take a look at it. Yeah.
And I think that that's really good. So something that we pulled out of that, I think Wayne actually just pulled it out, and I'll just read these off. We changed to using UTC times for JIDs and fixed the S3 pillar pagination. Let's see, added, is it IIS web configuration?
Yeah, that's the Windows Microsoft server that runs under Windows.
Added capability, this says added capability JBoss 7 to keep unchanged deployments, and added webhook support to Slack State, added Salt Cloud support for Tencent Cloud, added a new AWS SSM module, and added Azure DNS modules and states, and then added, is it DSON? Is that how you say it? Or
yeah, I think so.
Those are just some highlights, and it is really nice to have that changelog to just be able to like bullet point it without trying to dig into each PR issue or both, and I think it's really great that we have that. So,
and then of course, if you're interested, the issue numbers are or PRs are linked there, so you can just jump from the changelog to the issue tracker and figure out, okay, if you do need more information or context, you can kind of dig into that if you want. But yeah, it's a very welcome addition, I think, to Salt.
we talked about the work groups a little bit, and we already talked about some of the events that are coming up. Any questions around that? The work groups or upcoming events or Neon? I think next is Pedro to go over a deeper insight into PyTest if we don't have more questions on those.
So we were initially planning on getting PyTest into Neon. The work got done very close to the release, and so we decided to not make last-minute changes to the release, just to include PyTest. And so there's that pull request is actually still open and waiting for us to do the release and wait a couple of weeks just so that we don't get any serious bugs that we need to do a .1. And then we will start getting pull requests merged again. So there's the initial pull request for PyTest, and there's also two another pull requests regarding PyTest. So the first one is just switching from our current run tests runner to PyTest. And this is just basically switching the runner and all the necessary changes to make that happen. The second one actually changes to plain assertions. So if you are familiar with unit test 2, we have several methods that are self.assert something, and PyTest does an excellent job of figuring out what kind of assertion should be done, and in case of a failure, provide valuable feedback with just a plain assertion. So we are switching to those methods so that we can rely on PyTest to give us the right information. And the third pull request is actually providing examples and switching some of the unit tests that we currently have to use PyTest fixtures, namely to test the modules. So right now we rely on a mixing class to set up the required globals for the modules, and that third pull request just provides information on how to write new unit tests for modules. As a follow-up, we will be also adding functional testing, which is a way to test a module without having a master and a minion running. We just take out the protocol, the communication protocol, out of the test. We don't need to test that millions of times. And that actually increases the speed at which the test suite runs. So over time, we expect that either by migrating unit tests to the functional testing, or when providing new tests, just using functional instead of integration, that we don't slow down too much the test suite or even get it to work faster. So that will be further down the road. And for that, we will also provide some examples so that we can start providing information on how to actually write under PyTest. If you're not familiar to write with PyTest, we still support, and we will still support unit test 2 tests, although those are discouraged because we cannot use the full potential of PyTest. But if that's what you know, that's not a problem. And if you struggle with something with PyTest, feel free to ping me or one of the devs, and we will happily get you around that obstacle and into the next stage. More or less, that's how PyTest is right now. So unfortunately, it's on hold, but we are close to getting it in.
I think that's some really good points, Pedro, and I probably want to dig into that some more. I know we've had a lot of questions around, now that we're requiring PRs to have some tests with it, and exactly what those need to look like. Probably need to pull in some of those examples that you're pointing to.
Yeah, I also forgot to mention that the testing working group is actually working with Megan on rewriting some of the testing documentation. Right now, we've changed some of the processes on how we run tests, and we actually made it easier to run very close to the way we run them in Jenkins. So part of that documentation is already updated by Megan, which is just the switch to Knox and the preliminary info for PyTest. But we will be revamping the testing documentation with the examples and at least pointing to good code examples on how to write tests. So that will also get a revamp as we move into PyTest.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic work. Love hearing about that. Yeah, any questions around testing or PyTest for Pedro? Yeah, if not, that's totally fine. We can even come back to it. I'll make sure I give you guys some time. David Murphy, do you want to talk about some highlights around native Minion, what we did, where you can access it, what it is?
Yes, Native Minion. This was announced at SaltConf 2019 in Salt Lake. And currently we have working versions of Native Minion that aren't quite completed. Well, some are, some aren't. For Arista, Juniper, and Cisco switches. The first one to be ported to was a simple Native Minion for an Arista switch, versions 4.18 and 4.20. It was a simple case port. The Arista switch is based off of Fedora Core 18 32-bit OS. And so there was quite a bit of backporting because that end of life, I think it was 2014. And building in a Fedora 32-bit Fedora Core 18 module, creating the RPMs, and some of the RPMs were already there on the Arista module, but things like 0MQ, we had to backport that, Salt itself, and it was pretty straightforward. And within a week, week and a half, everything was up, running, tested, and looking good. But of course, once you have something running, you want other items added to it. And so there was a push to get Napalm and also the Arista's Pi API up and working. And typically most people would pip install these. However, you can't exactly pip install on a switch when you need something. So we built packages and all the dependencies that to get Napalm and Pi API and discovered a Napalm bug. So that part is on hold at the moment. But everything is working with the Pi API. It only took 80 packages to be created and 60 runtime. So that was quite a headache and obviously an unmaintainable nightmare going forward. But it works. It's under test and everything is fine, except to run into the issue in Arista's with their Swig packages. Unlike in Yum, where if there's a later module that supersedes your version of a RPM, it will just use the newer module. In Arista's Swig packaging, it will throw that as an error. So it gets very dependent on which maintenance release. If something has been upgraded, then the package will no longer work because we're getting these RPM errors because there's later versions. So the new approach being taken is to use SaltBin. And the Cisco, when they were on site in November, we went through the RPM first. And there's older switches use Wind River Linux 7, which is Red Hat-like, but not Red Hat, or anything similar in the way that the RPMs are structured and stuff. And so there was difficulty even for Cisco employees to create an RPM. And so we took the SaltBin, or they were convinced to use the SaltBin approach. And SaltBin is basically a self-contained binary with all the dependencies built into one executable that you can then call. You can be built with Python 3 internally. The version we did for Cisco was Python 3.7, which is fairly reasonable to use at the moment. Included all the dependencies. In a day and a half, we had it up working and being able to run test-out versions, for example. Of course, not fully fleshed out and unit tested. All of their third-party RPMs have to be signed with Cisco certificates. Given that SaltBin and now PopBuild to build SaltBin, those are open source projects, easily available on GitHub. And so they've been able to move forward creating modules for iOS, XOR, and their other switches using state and execution modules. They haven't released anything yet on that development, but that's the path moving forward. And it simplifies because we don't get into dependency hell of which version of OS is using which version of RPMs. We can build it as a self-contained package and move forward with Python 3 as the basis for all development, even on a Python 2 based platform, so that we don't get banned by Python 2's end of life. On the Juniper switch, that is actually currently undergoing testing. We have signed a SaltBin-based package. It's Juniper internally use FreeBSD. So again, it eliminates us from OS dependencies by using SaltBin. We're able to build everything up, execute it as a single binary. And there is one problem with that at the moment in shared libraries that we're actively working with Juniper's development teams to resolve as we speak. So the moving forward, SaltBin is being done for Arista now to get us out of this dependency hell of which version of RPMs are getting used on which version of Arista's OSs, and hopefully we'll be able to take Python 3 based Salt forward on these older switches, which are typically 32-bit based, limited memory in 4 gig, especially some of the other ones that are out in the field. And a lot of the question moving forward is supporting those switches and routers that are already in the field in large numbers, and having Salt be able to control and adjust configurations, be part of, say, Arista's zero ZTP, zero time provisioning, where essentially as the machine basically boots up, it can go out to a website and pull down its configuration, including Salt, which is under active development and test as we speak at some major sites. So eventually we have plans for other switch vendors, depending on how things are going. If there are some switch vendors which don't actually have an OS that we can leverage into, those will have to be used with Salt Proxy. But the main vendors are going to get taken care of and have the ability to run Salt natively. This gives us the ability to do things quicker. We're right on the box, so we can get better statistics and reporting natively rather than having a proxy go do it. It means that things can scale better as well. And that's really the highlights of native Minion on switches and routers. But with the initial trio being Cisco, Arista, and Juniper, we have covered a lot of bases. Any questions? Well, crickets.
Yeah. I think it gave us a lot of information. It's exciting work, though. A lot of talk about Salt Bin in general, and I think that it's really going to move us forward, and that's really exciting. We've had a lot of chatter over the last couple of weeks, and so there may not be too many more questions, but we'd love to hear it if there are.
Yes, for example, with the Neon release, there was a couple of packages, how should I put it, more modern versions of packages that had to be backported to very old OSs like Debian 8, since that still is not end of life, or Red Hat 6. And as a result, SaltBin gets us out of this mess of having to support new stuff on old stuff by having everything be a self-contained executable. It makes our lives a lot easier. And users, because users won't have to be tracking resource conflicts and dependency conflicts in that, we're using this version of ZeroMQ. We don't want to upgrade the ZeroMQ version, etc.
Yeah, I think it's going to solve a lot of problems, make us faster. It's going to be good. I don't think I have anything else on the agenda. We'll just open it up for questions, comments, concerns, or if anybody else has anything, we'd love to hear from you.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question is about PR 56039, which is the PR replacing PyCrypto with PyCryptoDome. I'm assuming that's coming from some type of compatibility problem. But setting the reasons aside, from what I can tell from this PR, the strategy is going to be for people who pip install Salt, they will get PyCrypto out of the box. So I think I understand that part correctly. Then presumably if they want to be running a version of Salt that doesn't have active CVEs, they would need to take the extra step of installing M2 crypto, or is that correct? Can somebody talk me through what's going on with this and which
maybe I can answer that question for you, Mike. Yes, It was a backwards compatibility issue at the last moment. There's PyCryptoDome, PyCryptoDome X, depending on whether you're a Red Hat family or a Debian Ubuntu family. And given the timelines to get Neon out, we had to revert that to so that we could get things shipping. However, where possible, we've adjusted for that. For example, in Red Hat 7 and RHEL 7 and RHEL 8, we actually package and ship M2 Crypto, a later version. So when they install, they're going to get an M2 Crypto version. But in the code, we've moved from using distutils to setuputils, which pulled in a bunch out of requirements.txt now, which was also involved things like message pack having to be backported to things like Debian 8, Amazon Linux 1. They're going end of life this summer, but we still needed to be able to ship, and so it was found at the last moment. And that was the most expedient fix, with the caveat that people who are worried about security will install PyCrypto Dome, Domex, or M2 Crypto as the preferred. Moving forward, once Neon's out and we get into Sodium development, that's going to be upgraded to M2 Crypto at the moment as the preferred method. Unless, well, PyCrypto Dome, Domex, given that, how should I put it, some people will probably prefer PyCrypto Domex over M2 Crypto. But
and these people, sorry, and these people who are getting an insecure version out of the box, how will they know that they need to perform an additional step in order to resolve that security problem?
Actually, that's the way it has been since we've been shipping code in 2019.2, 2018.3 branches, 2016, 2015. It has all been PyCrypto with that. And if people wanted security, they had to upgrade. So nothing has changed there in their workflow for the last 5 years.
That doesn't answer my question. How will people know that they need to do this if they want to have a more secure version?
As they did previously.
But how? Through what means? What will they look at to know?
I guess what you're asking for is a note in the release notes saying, please, if you're worried about security, please install PyCrypto Domex or M2 Crypto. However, I'm just pointing out this has been unchanged for the last 5 years.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that there's a means that people will know.
Will know, yes.
Okay. So could we please have something added to the release notes and to the installation instructions and potentially to the, if I understand this correctly, this will affect people who have pip installations as well. So potentially we could also put a note on the page for the pip download. Could we put it at least in those 3 places so people have an understanding of the security implications of those installation methods?
Yes, we can probably do that. But I would just like to point out that people who have been pip installing will have been doing that already.
I understand. I'm just asking for
documentation. A small paragraph stating that. I think that's doable.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, other questions? Or more about anything that we've talked about? Definitely want to hear from you guys. Adding to our release notes and making sure we're communicating out is something we're definitely working on. Want to make sure that we're getting better at it. So we'll come back to more. Does anybody have anything exciting coming up they want to talk about?
One, I guess, exciting thing is just our plan for the first merge after the code freeze is for actually applying black to salt. So that should it will be an awfully large PR, but actually having a consistent formatting throughout the SALT code base will be a very good thing. And with that, we'll also be, I think, pushing the use of pre-commit for people who are contributing to SALT, because it will help not only with that, but also running lint against any changes. I know just a gut feeling, probably 25% or so of PRs that I've reviewed typically will have some lint issue that's something minor, and pre-commit allows us to make sure that we're running the same steps locally that we will be on the actual, like on Jenkins. The only real difference is we won't run the entire test suite locally. But by using pre-commit, it will make life a lot nicer for those contributing to SALT. So those will be some welcome additions to the process, I think.
Yeah, there's the SCP is still open for that, the SUP.
No, that was approved several weeks, maybe a month or two ago.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's been approved. I've just been working on it. The reason that we are going to be merging it when we're merging is, as I worked on it before, I realized that 4 or 5 PRs were merged in the interim, and because it's changing the formatting in basically every single file in SALT, it was causing merge conflicts. So the best way to fix that is, rather than trying to fix all the merge conflicts each time they come up, and that's just a moving target, it's much easier to get it in before we start merging other things, and then each of those PRs should just be able to run black on their PR, and then that will eliminate any merge conflicts that they would not have had otherwise.
That's good.
I do have a couple more community related notes that just struck me. So the call for speakers is open for SaltConf EU. So if people have topics and are interested in going up to the Netherlands to speak, looking for proposals, we have about a half dozen spots open, things related to security, automation, kind of our usual set of topics. And then on a semi-related note, we have Gareth Greenway and Tom are speaking at, what's it called, Scale Conference, the first week of March. They'll be out in San Jose speaking. And then I will be speaking in Denver at Snowfrock, which is the OWASP conference that same week. So Denver or San Jose people, those are some kind of conference and learning opportunities for you if anybody's in here. I think I want to start announcing open calls for speakers and open speaking engagements so people know where they can sometimes find us in person.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, open for questions. Is anybody, I think we had a couple people join. If anybody has anything they want to bring up, we're just in the open part of the meeting where we just do comments. Sometimes we do snail jokes. It can be fun.
Should we make note that we're planning on switching to S3 for repo.saltstack.com 2 weeks or so after Neon release?
Yeah, good point, Bryce.
So
will that actually affect anybody, since they're just going to go through the website anyway?
the only difference it will make is people recursive W getting S will no longer be able to.
But there is a way, right, Bryce, that they can just like mirror the S3 stuff.
Yep, there's instructions on there to sync it using the S3 API, and it's pretty fast.
Nice.
And it's a lot less resource intensive for us than recursive W get.
But paths aren't changing, right?
Say that again.
Paths to what's in the repo, or paths changing?
Nope.
Like the URLs.
No paths are changing.
Okay.
It's basically moving out of DigitalOcean and into S3 as the backing store. So everything front end looks the same. It's just where we save off the data.
You're still gonna be running rsync on that on that though, because that is how many mirroring tools. I mean, not everybody's gonna want to mirror, and not everybody's gonna want to clone or mirror an S3 bucket.
I didn't hear half of that, but if you asked if rsync is remaining, we're planning on deprecating that in like 4 months, 6 months. We're not exactly sure on that, but we are planning on eventually deprecating rsync in favor of the S3 API.
So basically, for those who need to have it cloned into their internal infrastructure, I guess the way you're going to be telling them is sorry.
No, it's to use the rclone or S3 sync. It works very similar to rsync. Same command, just you can do subpaths. It should be very similar. And it's over HTTPS too, so it'll be secure as well.
Okay.
Well, we'll have some time in between,
That
so I think we can communicate about that as well and get some feedback on that communication. Sorry, I didn't interrupt. Go ahead.
you're just going to need to make sure that there's plenty of documentation for that for those who are going to have to change their processes. I mean, doing that without first providing a walkthrough on what they're going to need to do to keep syncing would be a bad idea. So that needs to be. I mean, the answer can't just
If
be.
you go to repo.saltstack.com, there's a tab on.
Use that.
So on repo.saltstack.com, there's a tab on how to sync. Is there any other things we should do to help people know what to do? You would recommend?
I haven't looked at that at some time because we've always just been able to use rsync. So if that's already documented there, great. I just wanted to make sure that it is documented before you decide to cut it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe a walkthrough at one of these meetings is a good way to highlight that and to maybe even walk through where we may not be getting the communication just right. That's definitely something we can put on the agenda. Since we're not going to deprecate it right away, we will have some time. I think that we can put that out to do and give it maybe even a full hour to get some people on that and walk through it.
Yeah, we also need to make sure it's very prevalent on repo.saltstack.com with instructions.
And if we post probably, of course, to the Slack announcements channel and IRC and probably this, I don't know if Salt users group, but probably the announce mailing list, posting to those different channels to say, hey, this is coming down the pipeline. If you're using this, you want to be aware that we're going to be changing this behavior. So just so people can get prepared and they're not surprised.
Absolutely. I think a walkthrough is actually just a really great idea. And we'll talk about when we can schedule that and announce that, make sure people can attend that want to and get lots of people there that will be using it. I think that's a great way to go. Yeah, other thoughts, ideas, questions, concerns, comments, jokes? Jokes are good. Anybody have a salt joke? No. No jokes. I know that DWAS has snail jokes.
Perhaps you shouldn't
but I'm a
encourage
little
him.
slow thinking of them right now.
I have one that my my son learned at school the other day. What is the opposite of a supernova? A super yes-ya.
That's great.
Yeah.
So my son is already an official dad. So,
Two peanuts walked down the road and they were assaulted. I hope that this has been beneficial. I apologize about the time change and the confusion about that. We are trying to work on that and get better about how we communicate. I think that we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. So we appreciate that. Hope we can make it light at the end, tell a few jokes. Hope you guys enjoy that. Does anybody have anything else, or should we give you back some time in your day? It's always good to have more time, right?
I did notice. I did in that pull request that I opened. I did notice that there were still some platforms that are failing with out of memory. I did give an example in so that might be something. I mean, there's certainly there nearly as many as there were before, but it doesn't look like it's completely gone away. Just FYI.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, happy Thursday, everybody. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah.
Bye.